40 years ago, China was on the brink of an enormous change.
For many Chinese citizens, I think a primary feeling was exhaustion.
Their life's path was set out for them.
所以你的发展空间就受到了很大的限制。为什么劳活这么苦这么累？
In 1978, a shift of direction would change everyone's lives. Initiated by Deng Xiaoping, the policy was known as reform and opening up.
Deng said, look, open up the economy. Open the window. If the flies come in, swat them.
开放呢，使得人们看到一个外面的一个大世界。
He transformed China and transformed the world.
With a stronger economy and more money in their pockets, Chinese people went from worrying about the next meal to nurturing dreams.
观众根本不让你下去，就一定要喊再来一个，再来一个，再来一个。
As China opened its doors, there were new opportunities to redesign China and the world.
I got a chance to build a quantum computing lab.
改革开放是一场全面这个从物质生活到精神生活的一种深刻的这个改变。
It was like fresh air that breathed through our stale environment.
I believe the 21st century will be China's century. I dare anyone to prove me wrong.
Today's China is a place of opportunity. 24-hour cities where anything is possible. Space to connect to nature and community. Time to enjoy food and absorb art and culture. And a link to the rest of the world through the click of a button.
People are aspiring and creating a future, and their outlook is global, and they're reaching for the stars.
All they know is transformation, is possibility, is that life tomorrow will be different from life today or yesterday.
This incredible transformation has had a cast of millions. From the new generation of doctors responsible for Chinese people living longer,
看见女老师这个飞刀飞针，觉得哇，好帅啊！
to the studious who demonstrate that knowledge is power.
这个事情到来是个梦想，这是历史的一个选择，是吧？很荣幸的，我考上了大学那一年。
From the world's leading innovators, building a clean and sustainable future for us all.
技术会让你看得更远、更深、更广。
To the millions of Chinese who have chosen to return home after living overseas.
So I just packed all my objects. I thought this is a chance to have a real impact in the world.
And the families making their homes and cities better places to live.
其實已經基本上走上富裕的道路。
Over the last 40 years, China has reinvented how and where people live. In futuristic cities like Guiyang, there's everything to enjoy modern life. Great housing, stimulating jobs, and a chance to unwind in beautiful places. This is a city where people want to live, work, and play. Rewind to 40 years ago, and it was a very different place to live. Lu Sulin and Yu Yiwei were assigned to work here as a doctor and an architect in the 1960s.
没有钱买来吃，年轻的时候水果少。现在社会发展了嘛？那个叫什么水果？这个潮州柑。潮州柑。
Back then, these streets had more bicycles. For a young couple starting out, city life was cramped and uncomfortable.
那提到嘛，我们大概有10多户人家住在一层楼，大家就是一个公用的一个走廊，也就是过道。我们当时没有厨房，没有厕所，没有浴室，用水的时候都要排队。
现在跟那以前有天渊之别啊！
大家像我们一样啊，这么努力，结果不一样在变。特别是我们的子弟，就享受到原来我们很向往的东西。
Meet Yu Chuan, their son. He's an entrepreneur who invents, makes, and shares his ideas with the world, all from his workshop in Guiyang.
自从我还是一个小男孩的时候，我就对技术有浓厚的兴趣。我记得家里第一次买电脑的时候，我是8岁，那时候特别着迷，每天都在编程或者玩游戏。
His childhood passion would become his career, and at 20, Chuan had the opportunity to further his tech skills in Germany. It was a tough decision.
当时我还是感受到来自父母的压力，因为作为中国的小孩，这样的一个决定是离经叛道的，违背父母的意愿是一个离经叛道的事情。新兴技术正在改变我们生活的各个方面，我觉得留在中国会有更多的机会。现在我在我的家乡，有一个非常成功的创业公司，我们在里面做一些很酷，然后很有创新，然后也很棒的产品。
Today, Chuan's showing off his inventions at Guiyang's Tech Highlight of the Year, the city's big data festival, an industry Xi Jinping has put special emphasis on.
And now you have younger generations
creating their own small companies, creating their enterprises.
这个我后面的这个是一个咖啡的机器人车，无人的服务，就是我们不一定要出去，可以让服务上门来找到我们，也可以让城市的碳排放减少，让交通出行的效率更高，从而让城市得到一个可持续的发展。我觉得技术如果能为人服务，能改变他们的生活，能让他们感到很开心、很方便，我非常有成就感。
And one of Chuan's biggest fans has come to see his latest invention.
好样的，好样的！
谢谢。好，
我为我的儿子能够创造出他这么好的成绩，把他原来的想法实现，感到非常的骄傲。
International singer Guarong, too, is deeply influenced by her relationship with her father. He was a talented musician who would teach Guarong and the other children in their Sichuan village how to play music.
并且他也知道音乐、艺术是可以开启人的智慧的。
Guarong is traveling to her hometown, an area transformed since her childhood.
你好，哎呦！通过这么多年大家的这个努力，看到了每一个地方它这种彻头彻尾的变化，我真的心里面非常的欣慰和高兴。
40 years ago, life in rural China was hard.
这个是我父母在他们刚认识、刚结婚那个时候住的房子。
Guarong's family were loving and close, but they were very poor.
那么多人，就是在那样一个无法想象的一个地方生活了那么多年，那不叫房子，根本不是房子，就是能够挡一下雨、挡一下太阳的一个地方。
Her father was a musician, working in the village as a farmer.
可是呢，他是一个特别有坚韧不拔的这种毅力的一个人，而且极其的乐观。他即便回到了家乡的农村，他手里面还带着一把提琴。他希望我每天干农活完了以后，我还可以每天练琴。
China was changing. Market forces had been introduced into the economy. Guarong's father had the opportunity to follow his dreams.
Reform and opening up introduced a whole new idea into society of what life and work might be like.
所以社会应该说从一个生存型社会向一个人的自身发展为主要目标的发展型社会实现了这样一个历史性的跨度。
This meant for the first time people were allowed to start private businesses. Guarong and her family began to earn a living as a touring musical act.
我觉得对于舞台，我是觉得是非常的亲切，或者说亲近，
When she was 15, Guarong got her first break, an audition with the Chinese Oriental Performing Arts Group. Her father had to push for it.
我还记得30多年前那个早上，而且爸爸很希望让我的小提琴，甚至于我的歌唱，能够让这样一位大师，这样一位音乐家听到。我们连去了3天，最后应该说我们的执着感动了这个门卫，然后通报了王坤老师。王坤老师打开门，让我们进去了。
那样的春节，你是春雨。
完了以后，那个我还记得当时那个场面，王坤老师用那种特别爱恋的那种眼神看着我说：“哎呀，小姑娘真不容易啊。”他说：“你们家的经历太不简单了。”他说：“我觉得你的音乐素养非常好，你拉琴能拉那么多高难的曲子。”王坤老师看完我拉琴唱歌之后呢，其实他就已经决定让我参加他们在成都的最后一场演出。哇，当时真的不知道说什么，就是我爸爸那种高兴劲儿就别提了。是主持人拉着我的手把我带到台上去，然后跟大家介绍说，这是我们今天刚刚收入东方歌舞团的一个小演员，然后呢，你们听听他唱的怎么样，他是你们的小老乡。
That day in Chengdu, Guarong took the first step that would propel her from the poorest of village childhoods to a career bringing music from China to audiences around the world. Before 1978, for the millions of Chinese who lived in the countryside, there was little opportunity to change their lives or shape their destiny.
I think the single most visible thing is a difference in everyday life. The state was still the driving, dominant element in controlling most of what people did.
Mobility was very limited. The great majority would never travel outside the area that they were brought up in.
For the ambitious, life felt very restricted.
我叫胡必亮，我在这个湖北的农村长大，所以呢，我所在的那个地区也非常贫穷，爸爸妈妈都是农民。这个4、5点钟就得出工，晚上8、9点钟上10点钟才能回来，所以这样就迫使我在考虑一个问题：为什么劳动活这么苦这么累？国家在那个时候给每一个人可以选择的机会就很少，没有上大学的机会，没有流动的机会，所以你的发展空间就受到了很大的限制。
You didn't really have a lot of choice about your own aspirations or where you lived, where you worked.
Deng Xiaoping realized that China couldn't possibly sustain this way of thinking.
And once you're in that mindset, then it's a dynamic. It's almost like perpetual motion.
In 1978, the door opened for Hu Biliang and for millions of his contemporaries. Universities reopened, and once again, students up and down the country sat the National College Entrance Exam.
这个事情到来是个梦想，这是历史的一个选择。很荣幸的，我考上了大学那一年。我走去这个村庄，走去这个我非常狭隘的世界。我不是为了逃避，我是为了这一片土地，我的这个村庄，我的这个家庭变得更好。
Reopening the universities was part of China's ambition to reach out to the world. In today's interconnected universe, it's hard to imagine how isolated Chinese people once were.
In the 1980s, we shouldn't forget that China was still a country that had very little exposure to foreigners.
Their knowledge of the outside world would have been extremely limited.
Those few foreigners who started to come in recall people shouting, "Lao Wai, Lao Wai," a foreigner, a foreigner. Not used in a rude way at all, but simply an object of curiosity because so few foreigners had been seen in China.
As ordinary Chinese people were taking small steps to understand the outside world, it would take somebody born in China but who had grown up overseas to be the bridge between the two.
你好, Yusai.
Oh, 你好,哥们.
你好, everybody.
I was born in Guilin. The Chinese call it the most beautiful place on earth. I lived there until I was almost 2 years old. Then my family moved to Hong Kong until I was 16, when I moved to New York City. Soon after I moved to New York, I started doing a TV series called Looking East. I wanted to be the Pied Piper to explain Asia to an American audience.
Hello, I'm Yusai Khan. Welcome to Looking East. There's an old Chinese saying, you are not a hero unless you've been to the Great Wall. And here we are, all heroes at the Great Wall.
Wow. My first trip to China was just amazing. The road from the airport to downtown was a dirt road about this big, and both sides were farms, and the city was dark when I arrived, and it was so dark that I could hardly see anything. But the whole street was packed with cabbage that a billion Chinese ate during the winter months. It was almost like a different landscape, like I was walking on the moon,
I visited the Heihe Experimental Primary School to observe the summer sessions.
Doing a program about Asia and doing programs about China, obviously I know that things are happening and changing.
And then I was confronted with this, an aerobics class. Now that is progress.
What is exciting is once you start doing something, something else happens without your even planning it. The Chinese government really have a desire to use TV to educate. And I said, who is going to do it for you? And they said, well, why don't you do a series for us? Now, that was a very brave thing. I never thought that this country will allow a program like this to happen. I did not know that they really, truly wanted to educate people, truly wanted to modernize China.
Before reform and opening up, China was a closed book. By the mid-'80s, the effects of the reforms were slowly being felt, and Chinese people were more and more eager to learn about the wider world. One woman who opened a window onto the wide world outside was Yusai Khan, through her hugely popular television programs.
Hello, I'm Yusai Khan. Welcome to One World. Today we are going to visit Egypt.
One World aired weekly in English and in Chinese to an audience of 300 million. To make the series, Yusai Khan filmed all around the world. Her mission, coming direct from the government, was to educate a Chinese audience that had been cut off from the world for a generation.
I have to tell you a very interesting story, and that story really clearly goes into my head and say, China is ready to change. I remember the first day, and I was wearing practically no makeup, in black and white jacket. And afterwards, the minister said, Yusai, is this how you produce in America? I said, no. He said, then I'm going to ask you to produce the show like the way you would produce in America. I was wearing earrings, and I was wearing makeup, but they asked for it. They were ready for it.
离开工厂后，古纳请我们到他家做客，同他的妻子和孩子见面。
When I presented this very middle-class home in Sweden, it's exactly what the Chinese were aspiring for, because they could not possibly imagine every child has a separate room. They call it the fresh air that breathes through our stale environment. They say, we didn't know that we could live like that.
People's lives were changing for the better. And reforms introduced in the late 90s gave millions the chance for the first time to own their home.
消费结构发生了历史性的改变。
One of the most notable phenomena in contemporary China, buying properties.
And homes need to be furnished.
我冰箱都好高兴哦，那时候。
这个照片是我照的，是我。冰箱是我记得刚刚买了没得1个礼拜。
记得第一次有冰箱，我们像过节日一样。
I think in the 1980s, people bought every type of electronic device they could get. Refrigerators and televisions were viewed as status symbols.
For Lu Su Lin, a precious part of their new higher living standard was the chance to travel.
一川小时候，我们带一川出去，目的就是想让他开阔眼界。那时候我们带他去看那个成都都江堰这个二王庙，
就看那么个工程，就眼见为实。
These days, they travel abroad, frequently sending Chuan a postcard back home.
到现在要自己可以去办了，而且通过这个互联网啊，或到这个手机都可以解决。
2015年6月，我第一次去美国，这是在美国环球影城。
Chinese travelers now have the money to go overseas to travel. They become the consumers of the world.
Older people, there they are traveling. There they are going to places they've always wanted to go to, and they can afford to do it.
其实我们可以概括起来说，我们改革开放前过的生活只能说温饱。到改革开放以后，80年代和90年代是小康。2000年以后呢，是走上基本富裕。
改革开放是一场全面的这个从物质生活到精神生活的一种深刻的这个改变。
Chinese families now also spend on education, on travel, on health. It's about the quality of life.
Dr. Wei Yung trained at Guilin Medical University in the 1990s and is now a director at the Guilin Maternity Hospital.
所以就是说，在这个过程当中，是慢慢的爱上这个行业。但是我觉得，当第一次接到这个宝宝的时候，有点不太敢抱，因为宝宝软软的那种感觉，就怕伤着他那种感觉，颤颤抖抖，因为觉得很软的一个宝宝在我手里面的。但是呢，也是一种很激动的这么一种心情。
Since graduating in 1998, Dr. Wei's job has involved treating patients from all over Guangxi province, including remote areas.
In the late 1990s and early 2000s, the Chinese government became very concerned that essentially the quality of rural healthcare was slipping.
Very large numbers of Chinese people had absolutely no cover or any serious cover at all.
Dr. Wei had one patient 20 years ago that she will never forget.
当时这个产妇送到我们这里的时候，她是应该在孕7个半月了，已经是羊膜早破，就是一来就进了产房，但是她很危险。但是当这个产妇分娩完以后，然后就是大出血，但是这个妈妈就是我们当时的医生护士都在围着她，都在想各种方法，各种各样的抢救手段在抢救她。说看着这个产妇这样的生命的一个消失，真的是觉得很心痛的感觉。但是好在她是个双胎的宝宝，当时非常7个半月，大概30周，快31周的。
Dr. Wei and her team looked at the case in more detail after the tragedy.
考虑她是一个脂肪肝，就是妊娠期的一个脂肪肝。其实她是真正是可以，就是说挽救她的生命的。那么这个妈妈她是一个。泉州县城里面的农村里面比较偏远的农村里面的一个妈妈。那么如果说这个妈妈如果能够定期的到医院一个产检，早期的发现这些指标的改变。
Changing attitudes by professionals like Dr. Wei have led to big improvements.
所以呢，我们近几年的我们中国的这个孕产妇死亡率是一直在下降的。医生跟患者之间就是大家建立一个信任的一个关系。如果你要是赶时间的话，也就尽量早一些。那么我们作为医生来说，或者是护士，就会跟他们在做康复的过程当中就会聊天，说，哎，你在这个带宝宝的过程当中有什么问题呀？是不是休息不好呀？我们就觉得其实，治病不是完完全全是他身体上的问题，而很多东西是他们就是说心理上面的，或者是生活状态的一些问题。
Thanks to all these improvements, a Chinese baby born today can expect to live 10 years longer than one born 40 years ago. China in the 90s was an exhilarating place to be. The door to the world was well and truly open, and Chinese people were eagerly soaking up new ideas, information, culture. For TV host turned entrepreneur Yu Sai-kan, it was the perfect time to inject China with a dose of color.
Right now, we're going to the #1 department store in Shanghai. I chose Shanghai to launch my cosmetics because Shanghai has always been and still is the most cosmopolitan city in China. So I thought if they don't accept me in Shanghai, I might as well pack up and leave. 金汉子用这个橘黄颜色的口红，所以橘黄颜色的胭脂是可以的。How do the leaders receive cosmetics? I was extremely nervous, but to my surprise, the reaction was fantastic. The Women's Federation, which is the semi-governmental organization for women, they were very eager to present a very fresh look to the world, that they wanted to learn how to dress themselves and how to actually make themselves look prettier. It was hard because they were not used to it. In China, their mothers never saw makeup either, so they had to learn it on their own. 如果我们把这头发弄得这么长短呢，怎么样？多少分？100分啊！I gave an immense number of lectures all over the country, literally demonstrating how to use makeup.
因为我皮肤比较干嘛，所以就是
皮肤比较干啊。首先呢，你要用一点面霜才涂你的粉底霜。
Yu Sai, he was really a pioneer, a leader on fashion and new style for Chinese people.
In the old days, there was a section in the department store called Old Women's Clothing. I would say to you that there is not a single department store with that today. The Chinese women today are much more fashionable.
They know about the world in a way they didn't know about the world before. They're just much more connected up.
These are things that their parents wouldn't have been managing to do, and that gives them a wider sense of, engagement with the outside world.
The psychology of the people have changed very dramatically.
The people don't look the same. Their dress, their customs, where they eat, what they do, what they buy.
It's hard to appreciate how China was closed off to ideas 40 years ago. It had a big influence on musician Guarong's early life.
在70年代到80年代末，其实这一段时间对于中国人流行音乐的感受是非常保守的，甚至那个时候我还记得小时候听流行音乐都是偷偷的打开那个转到一个什么音乐台偷偷听，不敢。而现在呢，我觉得经过多年的改革开放，这种生活和思想上的这种转变，让现在的人们他们更多的是打开了自己的心。
Guarong is on the road again, and this time she has a very important audience.
其实这次再次回到回龙小学来跟这些小朋友见面，教他们唱歌、弹琴。 我希望能够把音乐这个层面的概念带给这些小孩子，就是让他们对音乐、对艺术有一种渴望，有一种求知欲之后呢，他们将来的人生是非常正面的去走。
开放的使得人们看到一个外面的一个大世界。
So the horizons of the Chinese today are so much broader. They don't have a path set out for them.
The Chinese are becoming not just Chinese citizens, but global citizens. It is now a very connected up country. And at the same time, of course, China's great thirst to find out about the outside world.
The openness to new ideas and experiences hasn't just been one way.
可能因为我在一个这样一个特别的院团的工作，所以我有了这样一个机会，然后可以走出国门，走到世界各地去传播中国的文化。我在国外演出的时候，如果底下坐了很多华人华侨，我会告诉他们，我说今天的中国在不断的发展，而且城市变得更加的美丽，人们呢也生活得更加的幸福。大家如果有机会，可以更多的时间回到国内来看一看。所以可能在中国这种变化当中，我也算是尽了一点点的力量。
For the last 40 years, China has been eagerly learning about the outside world. Now the world is beating a path to China's door. Since Hu Biliang left his village, he's had a stellar international career as economist and academic.
一箭射线，这也是我最开心的事情，最高兴的一件事情。每年我都非常享受这一个 moment， 非常享受。
Today, students flock to learn about China's development experience at his institute at Beijing Normal University. He first got the idea for the course from his own student days in Germany.
来培养发展中国家或者不发达国家的这些学员。我的学生呢，主要是从非洲、拉丁美洲或亚洲的发展中国家，他们来的，所以呢，他们这些基本上都是在这些国家的政府部门工作。
They study how China has achieved its economic transformation and see what lessons can be learned for their own countries.
The question is always there. What can we learn from the Chinese experience? Is it unique? What or how did China succeed?
Now, 2018, we're looking at China becoming a global leader on new models of economic development.
Professor Hu's students, proudly graduating today, are from countries involved in President Xi Jinping's flagship Belt and Road Initiative.
Belt and Road Initiative is an initiative from the Chinese government to enhance connectivity and economic activity amongst neighboring countries.
And looking at countries in South Asia, Central Asia, Africa, many of these countries are landlocked. They're facing the same challenges that China faced with its own interior.
中国现在不仅给自己，也给世界提供了一个更好的机会，就是“一带一路”倡议。
The Chinese are committed to the importance of an ecologically advanced and harmonious world.
Well, I think there's a lot that other countries can learn.
It's about leading. It's about global leadership. And that's going to require not the reform of enterprises, but it's going to require another psychology.
Once, Chinese people looked abroad for greater opportunities. Today, China's focus on science at the cutting edge is tempting many from abroad to put down roots here.
Huge expansion of the universities taking place, attracting talent from all over the world, particularly Chinese talent.
China has been able to attract quite a lot of returnees.
Turing Award winner Professor Andrew Yao is one top talent who has been drawn to China. In 2004, he made a life-changing calculation.
I was invited to return to China to take on a professorship in Tsinghua University.
Professor Yao was born in China but studied and lived in the US for over 30 years up until decision day.
I thought about it for a couple of weeks. I thought this is a chance to have a real impact in the world. So I just packed all my objects and households, and I moved to Tsinghua University.
His decision was driven not only by future prospects, but also by the past.
I was very much a fan of the heroes, the generals, the scholars of ancient China. But in this Tsinghua garden, there were many famous scholars from the past. I really felt that I now understood what it meant to be a Chinese scholar. Coming to China has given me the opportunities to do things which I would not have been able to do in the United States. I could change the careers and the worldview of many young, talented Chinese students. I thought developing them fully would be a great service, not only to China, but actually to the world. In China, I get a chance to build a quantum computing lab.
From mobile pay to algorithms and big data, quantum science enables secure transfer of information and is the bedrock for future scientific innovation.
Curiosity-driven research today will become the world-changing technological revolutions in the future.
China is looking to bring that innovation into China. Moreover, it's looking to leapfrog innovation.
And that's what we try to do in our institute here.
I think Xi Jinping as a leader is not looking at China today. I think he's looking out on a curve way ahead into the future.
I'm from Tanzania. I work with the government institution. I've realized my dream and I've got what I wanted to learn from China. I feel very proud to go back home and to apply everything that I learned from this program.
我来培训他们，我花很多时间来培训他们，很高兴。
Some developing countries, what is important is how to make our developing countries get developed. This is the dream for all of us.
Great, thank you so much for representing.
Very exciting, no?
Yeah, it is.
This is what 40 years of reform and opening up to new ideas looks like. Chinese people live longer and better than ever before. They're globe-trotting tourists and citizens of the world. They enjoy a rich education. Technology is transforming every aspect of people's lives, but this transformation has had downsides.
China's huge industrial growth has been based on often very, very heavily polluting products.
You have these mega cities which there are more than 20 million, and there are 5 or 6 of these now.
And so if you do not have a green energy system for this country, you will not have the water, the agriculture, the health that the Chinese people need for a future that is going to be prosperous and healthy.
Entrepreneurs like BYD founder Wang Chuanfu are tackling this crisis head-on.
中国是全球规模最大的城市化过程，那相当于每年有2000万人口从农村到城市。我们知道电动车的有很大的重大意义，特别在中国，它有非常大的紧迫性。
His vehicles have been adopted by cities all over the world. Now he's set his sights on a transport system for the future.
地下室的地铁，地铁太贵，地面又太堵，那比亚迪把眼光放在空中。那云轨的话呢，可以解决这个城市交通拥堵一个很好的解决方案。然后在空中大概在12米左右，可以俯瞰这个城市的美景，因为它是橡胶轮胎的，用电力来驱动的，没污染、没噪音。这种网形成以后，老百姓真正才不愿意开车，才坐你的公共交通。能够真正把城市的拥堵彻底的解决掉。
China has set itself challenging green targets.
By 2050, 80% of all China's energy will be green. That's the kind of transformation we've achieved.
We're engaged in a battle to reduce carbon emissions to try and stem climate change. actually, the front line of that battle is the urban environments in which people live.
Recently, President Xi, merged together Environmental Commission to be able to govern this process of transformation.
Sustainable cities means that the cities are an urban environment in which people can live happily, can work successfully, can raise a family.
Guiyang is your prototype ecological city. So it is going to be the leader on innovation for environment and for showcasing this.
By 2020, 50% of Guiyang will be parkland. These spaces are the jewel in this city's crown.
我觉得贵阳的这种转变不仅仅是一个产业上的变革，更重要的是它启发人的一种创新思维和选择城市的一种新的思维方式。我觉得我能参与到其中，能做出影响，我感到非常非常兴奋。
原来的小河沟就变成湿地公园，变得很，所以我们贵州省呢叫做千园之省。
Green spaces, fresh air, and nature gives an alternative reality to the fast pace of a city, where the worker never sleeps.
如何在城市里面平衡生活和工作，这是一个挑战。
很少有时间休息，那么抽时间到这附近的这个公园来走一走，放松一下。
Chuan says he works as hard as he does for one reason alone.
未来我的女儿这一代，他们可以能在一个身心健康、充满科技、环境优美的生活空间里面去工作、去生活。
If you think about what a Chinese citizen would have experienced in 1978 and what they'd experience in 2018, I think the single most visible thing is a difference in everyday life.
This is a different world. China has basically become a different kind of a country.
历史性的变化。
Not just for China, but for the whole world.
Over the last 40 years, China has created her own story.
It's 1 billion people that I would actually be able to open the window for them. I actually have the ability to tell them about the world that they had never ever seen before.
This transformation has happened thanks to the tenacity and imagination of millions.
所以中国的改革开放啊，我们从解放思想
and open people's eyes to opportunity.
最终，你朝着你的目标去前行，最后所有的路都会为你开辟，你的梦想终究会实现。
Ambition continues to propel China's people into the future.
China today, you determine what it is that you do.
改革开放的40年，改变了中国，改变了中国人的命运。
China is the most important agency for change and progress in the world.
China, focused on the future.